Hello and welcome back to Commercial Radio Lesson 17. So today we're continuing with where we left off in the previous class, which was outside broadcasts and crossing. So we looked at those from a revenue perspective. And today what we're going to be doing is continuing on the journey of Chapter 9, which is airtime overall. We're going to be looking at integrated campaigns and digital integration. So if you want to open your textbook on page 352, up until page 362, that's what we'll be looking at today. So in today's life, okay, so the way that we live today and the way that we structure our radio campaigns today, we no longer simply just make an advertising spot and put that out on air. Okay, so no longer do we just have generic schedules that's running. Like all types of advertising, radio advertising has become way more sophisticated. And there are now more ways in which radio stations can create campaigns by using various communities online and on the ground to communicate the messages of their clients. As you would have seen in the past couple of lessons, so the previous 6 lessons up until now, everything that we spoke about was different types of airtime that can be sold. So everything from sponsorships and competitions to power spots to brand ambassadors to branded content to outside broadcasts, okay, to generic spots. Integrated radio campaigns are designed to carefully manage campaign messaging across multiple types of media, which in some cases means partnering with other media. So whether that's TV shows or magazines or other news outlets or digital news outlets, etc., to secure an even wider audience. The art of developing an integrated radio campaign is based in developing a wide variety of communication activities, tools and techniques in order to deliver a coordinated and consistent message to the audience and to achieve the goal that the advertiser has set. That's what it all comes down to at the end of the day, okay? Is to reach the goals that the advertiser has set. If you look at that picture, that's on your PowerPoint slide right now. That picture is there for you to get a sense of the size and the scale that an integrated marketing communication plan can have. So that image maps out the number of different platforms or touch points that a consumer can use to engage with the brand. It's important to bear in mind that not even a radio station or every advertising client will have access to all of these. It is important though that when radio stations design integrated campaigns, they consider all of the touch points they do have access to in order to communicate with as wide a section of the target audience as possible. So you might want to run an integrated campaign that makes use of, for instance, Twitter and Messenger and mobile messaging and perhaps email, perhaps a mailer. Maybe you're connecting it to games, okay? So to advertising in games. There's so many things that you can do with it. It purely depends on the touch points that you have access to and what it is that your client or what it is that the client at the end of the day wants. So apart from the radio station itself, every station has numerous digital platforms available to them, as well as event and on the ground opportunities to be able to promote campaigns. All of these elements, when properly planned, integrated and utilized, provide provide ways in which the station can increase the revenue it generates for a campaign, as well as the size of the audience the campaign reaches. So originally, digital and activation opportunities were considered alternative streams of revenue. But as digital media in particular requires an increasingly large portion of advertising budgets, these have become integral to the execution of radio campaigns. So it's part of that whole 360 approach. Most South African radio stations estimate that the share of radio advertising spend in the integrated and non-traditional space is around 40%. Okay, so some claim that this number is even closer to 50%. What does this mean for us? This means that up to half of all money spent on radio stations is not being spent on generic spot schedules. And this in itself represents a major shift from 20 to 25 years ago, when a generic campaign was believed to be the only way to use the medium effectively. Just look at how far we've come in 20 to 25 years. The rise in social media as an advertising medium has led to engagement becoming increasingly desired by advertisers. Okay, so it's no longer simply about frequency, it's about engagement. Advertisers, quite rightly, demand that their investments in radio advertising deliver the same level of meaningful engagement between consumers and their brand that they believe can achieve between consumers and their brands that they believe they can achieve with social media advertising. So radio is fortunate in the sense that its entire medium is built around intimate engagement between listeners and presenters and personalities. So it works very well alongside social media, keeping in mind that when it comes to radio, you speak to one person. So radio is intimate, it's personal, okay? Which is what you'd want. In the past, what happened was that radio stations would guard their intimacy. It's not something they would want to share, as well as their brands, actually, for that matter. And they restricted advertisers to only being able to make use of pre-recorded advertising that was scheduled in standalone commercial breaks. So you could only literally advertise, if you look at a clock, in those segments that have been put aside for advertising. Those days are long gone. But what it did do is it kept the line between advertising and the editorial content very separate from each other. However, as brands and businesses are increasingly becoming part of our content consumption, and their news and affairs are of increasing value and interest to consumers, radio stations have allowed that line to blur. While they're still protective of certain types of content, and many of them clearly signpost commercial content to help listeners discern the difference, they're far more open to advertisers communicating their messages outside of their commercial breaks. Just again, think about everything that we've spoken about in the previous 6 lessons. Those were not perhaps, well, with the exceptions of the generics and the live reads, none of the rest of those were in commercial breaks. The days where you can shout one generic message at hundreds of thousands of listeners, often with vastly differing and psychographic profiles, and worry about the metrics of reach and frequency are gone. Yes, advertisers still need to meet the basic metrics, but they've become increasingly willing to sacrifice a wide-reaching advert for more meaningful metrics, such as engagement and interaction. Okay, so what's important today is engagement and interaction above an ad that's wider reaching, but I might not necessarily be reaching my target audience. Radio as an intimate medium works on 2 levels. The first level is the relationship between the listener and the station brand. And the second level is the relationship between the listener and the presenter. So that first one, between the listener and the station brand, was particularly relevant in South Africa during the apartheid era, when radio stations had a very strong influence on many people's worldviews. Radio stations also influenced music tastes, the understanding of the world, and family behaviors and traditions. Okay, so a vast number of South Africans still listen to the stations that they listened to with their parents or with their families when they were young, or at least they'll sample listen to those stations when there are particular shows or presenters on air. Think about yourself as an example. I'm sure you still listen to some of the stations that you listened to with your parents growing up, or certain presenters or certain shows specifically. And then that second level that I spoke about, listener and presenter. And then if we look at that second level there, the listener, which is the relationship between the listener and the presenter. Presenters have become even more central in attracting and retaining listeners who are now more connected through social media and event exposure. This is heightened by the explosion of the influencer as a media trend. Although radio presenters and DJs have always had a celebrity status, it wasn't something that the radio stations capitalized on commercially until recently. The best presenters understand that they carry an appeal for advertisers that are looking to find influencers to create positive engagements with their brands. Many South African radio presenters have more social media followers than they do actual listeners. An integrated radio campaign where a presenter aligns themselves with the brand, talks about the brand on air, and then engages further with the brand through social media and live activations is very attractive to most advertisers and enables them to secure additional integrated value for their campaign more effectively than buying up separate media campaigns and trying to connect them into one. The ability for presenters to now connect with listeners 24/7 has contributed hugely to the popularity of integrated radio campaigns. What marketer would not want to extend listener engagement with their brand across the day, the week, or the year? We call these always-on campaigns. The popularity of integrated and non-traditional radio advertising in South Africa is partly due to our tightly regulated environment. South Africa has very few commercial radio stations per person compared to other international markets. For example, the United Kingdom supports around 300 commercial radio stations, whereas South Africa only has 30 to 35 commercial radio stations, even though the population of the UK is very similar to that of South Africa. So this has led to South African radio stations becoming very flexible with regards to how they allow brands to engage with their audiences. Most stations allow brands to play a central role in primetime live content. In markets where listeners have a lot more choice and the competition for listeners is very fierce, program managers are much less flexible. So in the UK, for instance, editorial content and advertising are kept completely separate. Okay, you can see a clear divide between them. The focus is on protecting the integrity and the quality of the content in order to maintain listener loyalty. This difference is a major reason why integrated and non-traditional advertising in the UK accounts for only an estimated 20 to 25%. The question now is, does the lack of focus on fiercely protecting content make for a worse listening experience for South Africans? Do integrated campaigns make for a poor listening experience? Like most things in a creative environment, this depends entirely on the quality of the content around which the campaign is built. A campaign that is conceptualized and implemented by somebody who doesn't understand what listeners are looking for will almost certainly fail. We hear these campaigns all the time on radio, where the clients or the agencies insist that the listeners answer boring product-related questions, or that presenters must endorse a service that doesn't match with their personal or organic choices, for example. A campaign conceptualized by people with extreme... On the other hand, a campaign that's conceptualized by people with extensive radio content experience and who understands how to retain a listener can be hugely successful, not just for the advertiser, but also for the radio station. A well thought out integrated campaign can add to the listening experience. So it's really important that you make the separation here between whether a campaign is being implemented, is being conceptualized and implemented by someone who doesn't understand what listeners are looking for versus someone who has extensive radio content experience and who understands how to retain a listener. So that was purely looking at integrated campaigns. Now we move at looking at digital integration. Digital and social media have increasingly become popular ways for marketers and their brands to reach audiences. South Africa has the 6th highest rate of internet usage in the world, with the average person spending more than 8 hours online, 8 hours per day online, and approximately 23 million people are on social media. So naturally, a client with a product or a service to sell would want to ensure that it has presence and can communicate effectively to people online where they're likely to see it. Radio stations, like any business, have a number of digital and social media tools and platforms available to them. We've previously spoken about owned, earned, and paid media. And now we're going to look at the ways in which these types of media can be utilized to generate revenue for the radio station by on-selling opportunities to publish content online. We use the term on-selling because radio stations don't own social media platforms. They use social media platforms like any other business to communicate with the audiences and to build up brand loyal communities made up of people connected to the work that they do. So social media platforms are utilized as free advertising tools for businesses, but in the case of a radio station and other types of media businesses that make content as their core product, the communities that they can build up on these free advertising platforms can be very valuable to the radio clients. So these communities can be on-sold to clients, which then generates revenue for the station, but not for the actual social media platform. So you can buy a post from a radio station to post on Facebook, and the radio station will make money out of it, but Facebook won't, unless it's a boosted post. So if we briefly chat about what we spoke about in chapter 6, we're quickly going to look at the types of digital media that radio stations use from an owned, earned, and paid perspective, in order to add more media opportunities to integrated campaigns for clients. When these are analyzed, it becomes clear how radio stations can add messaging to these platforms easily, and in the case of owned and earned media, without spending more, in order to spread client messages to wider audiences. Okay, so these are the 3 types of digital media that radio stations can use for integrated campaigns. So when it comes to owned digital media, that will be a radio station's own website, their own microsites and blog sites, their own mobile sites and a mobile app if they have one, their own social media pages and platforms, including Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, and LinkedIn. The earned media that they get is comment sections of owned digital media spaces. So anything that you comment on their personal Facebook pages, Twitter pages, Instagram, etc. The station and client brand mentions in any type of digital media, and then posts or shares, recommendations, mentions, reposts, reviews, that kind of stuff. And then paid digital media, on the other hand, is cost per click campaigns, including banners and display adverts, sponsored and promoted posts, and retargeting strategies. And then influencer posts, where influencers are clearly in brand partnerships. So let's break these down. And let's start with owned digital media. It's unlikely that there are any radio stations who don't have a website. I know there's a few smaller community radio stations who don't, but I don't know of any commercial radio stations who don't have a website. This is the digital home of all radio stations and the space where they have the most control over their content. Stations can even use podcasting and audio streaming services to secure online audiences for their product. Microsites are usually built by stations when they're running a big integrated campaign or planning a large-scale lifestyle event and activations that require more complex digital functionality. So something like, for instance, e-commerce, where listeners can buy tickets and merchandise. Blog sites are rarer, but make for great platforms where presenters can share more about their personal interests and interact with listeners. So, for example, a sports reader can blog about their perceptions of team rankings in soccer, and listeners can respond with comments. This can help to develop further content for the station and the sports reports. Most radio stations have mobile apps that allow their listeners to tune in via their phones. Many radio stations can monetize these apps for clients by implementing certain campaigns on the app through pop-up messages on the screen, page takeovers that reflect a client's brand design, and voting applications that allow listeners to enter competitions directly through the app. The emphasis here is convenience, giving the listener everything they need in one place to make it easier for them to interact, and therefore more likely that they will interact. All radio stations make use of social media to promote, to extend, and gather content in real time. Social media allows radio shows and presenters to have more access to their market and allows the audience more access to stations and their favorite presenters. It's also highly measurable, so stations can accurately assess the reach and response of the audience base for their clients in post-campaign reports. The next one that we're looking at is earned digital media. So earned digital media is the online equivalent of word of mouth. This is particularly relevant on social media, where people use the platform to share their views and opinions on various topics and issues, such as what radio station or presenter, for instance, what a radio station or a presenter is doing, wearing, what are they promoting. From a client's perspective, social media provides a transparent space to run promotions and to invite input from listeners. Social media is growing rapidly in South Africa, with 5 million new users between 2018 and 2019. The average South African has 8 social media accounts and spends almost 3 hours per day checking their feeds and scrolling through content. Just quickly think about it. Think about yourself. How many different social media accounts do you have? Probably close to 8, or anything from 5 upwards, I would guess. This means that social media is becoming increasingly important for reaching consumers, okay? It means if I want to talk to you, I need to talk to you through your social media accounts. Furthermore, social media allows businesses and brands to observe and monitor consumer behavior, to learn about changing habits, interests, priorities, and adapt their marketing approach to suit these trends. So it's very important information that can be gathered. And then the third and final one, paid digital media. For big campaigns, the station may allocate a portion of the marketing budget to co-marketing activities. Co-marketing is when two brands, in this case, a radio station and the client's brand, to bring one campaign message across. The intention is to pool marketing resources and for the station to take a portion of the value of the sales in order to execute the integrated campaign and implement paid digital media. The station can utilize the budget to purchase pay-per-click campaigns, place promoted posts on, for example, Twitter and Instagram, and purchase social media advertising space, such as on Facebook, as per strategy and targets set up with the client. What we're going to look at now is a couple of different images, which offers an idea of the number of different types of digital media options that a client can buy. For a radio station to sell exposure on their own digital media platforms, they'll draw up a social media content plan. Once this has been approved by the client, it can be executed as per the timing plan by the social media community manager or the digital marketing representative with that station. When we start looking at this, notice how the content plan treats content differently across all the platforms. If we start here by looking at the integrated campaigns, you'll see at the top there it says what you get, what you pay, and notes. So if we look at the what you get first. So what has been utilized here? Facebook, Twitter, Instagram post, and an Instagram story, and then a YouTube post. So you can see the size there. It tells you how many people are on each of their platforms, and then what you pay. Okay, so Facebook post there, 5 grand. Twitter post, 7 grand. Instagram post, 4 grand. Instagram story, 3 grand for 3,000 for 3 stories. And a YouTube post, 3,500 per post. And then next to the Facebook post, the note there, station uses paid digital media to boost posts for optimal performance. So a part of the money that you're paying them will go towards boosting a post. The same with the Twitter post. They'll also use paid digital media to boost a post. Instagram does the same. They'll also boost their post. And then under the Instagram story, they say it's a graphic-based post, which you as a client need to promote, very important. Should a presenter or DJ be used, post must be related to the show that the campaign is running on. No personal endorsements by the presenter or DJ in their Instagram stories. And then the YouTube post station uses paid digital media to boost the post once again. And then if we look at the right side, it says video production. So you pay 25,000 Rand in production costs, and that gives you a 2 to 3 minute video and a 1 minute social media cut down video. Then there's general terms and conditions, obviously. Then there are digital campaigns, which say standalone digital campaigns with no on-air execution. Okay, so this is not on air at all. What you then get, you'll see it's divided into top shelf, middle shelf, Rack City, Party Pack, and bespoke campaigns. So the top shelf there, you get a competition on their website, 2 Facebook posts, 2 tweets, 2 Instagram posts, 1 Instagram story for 75,000 Rand, and they'll boost it for you. The middle shelf is, so there's no website mention there, but you do get 3 Facebook posts, 3 tweets, 3 Instagram posts, and 1 Instagram story for 51,000, and we'll boost it for you. Rack City, you'll get only 1 post, one tweet, one Instagram post, and one Instagram story for 19,000. Then they have a party pack, so which is only for events. So if you know you have a very big event coming up, you can buy this for 38,000 Rand, which is one Facebook event, okay, so pre-awareness, one Facebook event album, post awareness, one Instagram post, and one Instagram story. And then they have tailor-made solutions for your brand based on the objectives, budget, and nature of your business. And again, they have their general terms and conditions. On the right-hand side, they speak about the digital power spot rates, okay? So we've spoken about power spots. You should know what that is by now. Power spots are endorsed or unendorsed, where we speak about it. In this case, what it means is it's when station presenters amplify social campaigns on their own social media platforms. And then you get 3 tiers of influencers. So you get the influencers with 100 plus followers, the middle tier influencers with 50 to 100,000 followers, and then the ones with under 50,000 followers, and you pay per post there, okay? So what they do is they will repost the station's content on their Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook accounts. So this is part of the radio station's integrated and digital rate card. Now what you see, what's starting here at the bottom, on the right-hand side on the bottom, is the social media content plan for a week. Okay, in this case, the Facebook one. So what you'll see is you'll see the theme there and the copy and the image. Okay, so everything that you get together, and that's how you post it. Same with Twitter, the theme, the copy, the image, how you post it. Instagram, the theme, the copy, and the image, and that's how you would post it, okay? There are products and services that benefit from physical contact with customers, which for events and activations we would refer to as on the ground. This gives a radio station an opportunity to create engagements between the station, the advertiser's brand, and the audience in the physical world. Okay, this is where an activation integration takes place. So what we've looked at today for this lecture was digital integration. What we're going to be looking at for the next activation, what we're going to be looking at for the next class is activation integration. Okay, so from digital integration to activation integration and seeing how it all fits in together. For homework, what I want you to do for me is to plan a sportswear brand using table 9.5 on page 360 in Next Level Radio. So that is this one here on the right-hand side, okay, the one that starts with PowerSpot digital rates at the top. And the brand is launching a brand new shoe. This shoe is made from plastic waste recovered from the ocean. So you need to utilize Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for your social media campaign. Okay, so a social media campaign, this can be an example. So both of these can be an example of a social media campaign, all right? That's also something that you need to do for your assessment. So it's something good for you to think about and to practice and to let me look at so that I can guide you so that we can see if you are going in the right direction, okay? For now, though, that brings us to the end of this integration campaign lesson. Okay, so we looked at integration on the whole, and then we spoke about digital integration. And like I said, in the next class, we will continue with activation integration. So until then, I say goodbye to you for now. Bye.